Um, as you are aware, I send you the recording usually on Tuesday. Not all the time, but usually on Tuesday, I'm able to send you the recording. And I'll also send you the syllabus and the PowerPoints that we use tonight. So we're going to go over the syllabus right now so you know what's expected of you. And let's just go through it here. A course of leadership principles. And we're using John Maxwell's DVDs or his videos and the companion book, The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, as well as having lecture and discussion. So there's going to be a lot of video. You're going to be watching a lot of John Maxwell in this class. But in between each law, I will share thoughts. We will discuss the law, and we'll try to gain as much information as we can. Course objectives. You'll be able to access your own leadership skills to determine areas of weakness. A chain is only as strong as its weakest link. You're going to be able to understand leadership principles and apply them to your own life. To prepare you for being a leader, which others will follow. To train and equip others for leadership. Establish leadership life principles to enhance your service in God's kingdom. Teach organizational skills and help you and those you lead reach your God-given potential. And be able to teach these same leadership skills to others. So, the main book for this class is the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. Okay? And by the way, I have some of your books. A few of you bought books from me. I have those books. You need to make a plan. If you haven't already made a plan, make a plan to get those ASAP so that you can read the material. But I don't want you to get, if you haven't already bought it yet, I don't want you to get the workbook on the 21 Irrefutable Laws, but get the actual book. I'll talk about this other in just a minute, okay? Course format, of course, because of the pandemic, we're on Zoom. Course requirements, course attendance and participation. There's going to be a leadership book report. I want you to choose one of these books up here, The 1 Minute Manager by Blanchard, or Leadership as an Art by Max Dupree, for a book report. And I do have a copy or two of these, I think, that I could loan you. But some of you may just want to get it on Kindle, get it immediately, and it's a lot cheaper. They're both very small books, and I want you to choose one of these books by Blanchard or Dupree for your book report, which is a typed 2 to 3 page book report giving, number 1, a brief summary of the book, number 2, your evaluation of the book, and number 3, application, how you plan to put these concepts from the book into practice in your life. Please give your name, date, and class on the top left corner of the first page. List the book title and author. Also give a heading to each of the 3 sections. You head the one section as summary, the next second section is evaluation, and the next section as application. It says do the 3rd week of class. That's best. If it takes a little longer, I totally understand, especially with getting books nowadays, okay? But I'll work with you on it. Number 3 is a leadership movie. I want you to choose one movie from the approved class list and view the movie as you fill out your evaluation paper. But don't do it till after the 3rd week of class. But I really prefer you would do it after the 4th week, but no sooner than after the 3rd week. And I'll go over that with you in just a minute. There's a final exam. So all you're doing in this is one leadership book report of a short book, watching a movie and writing a little write-up on it, and then a final exam of 21 questions. There's going to be one question from each law, and then 4 essay questions on the course and or leadership. Okay? So your course attendance and participation is 20%, book report 25%, leadership movie assignment with the evaluation sheet is 25%, and the final exam is 30%. If you want to read both extra books on leadership with book reports, you could get 10% extra credit, but I doubt that most of you will have that much time. And so there's our class schedule, class policies, and the contact information with the Zoom ID and everything. Now, let me go over this other before I do that. I need to pull something up here. Give me just a second. This is what you're going to be doing about the movie. Okay, where am I at here? Do you see that movie assignment? Is that showing up? Okay. The movies listed below, which I don't think we have. Oh yeah, there we go. Movies listed below are required for you to see, or one of them, not all of them, one of them. Send me a written response of your comments regarding the following. Identify the leadership principles throughout the movie. Name the characters who displayed these. Identify the positional leaders. Identify the real influencers. This is why you need to wait a little while, because you're going to be learning stuff about all of this as we go through this course. How did influence play the key roles? What changes were necessary to make the main character a successful leader? And what did you learn as a leader from this movie? You can watch the movie Amazing Grace, U-571. Got to understand that there's some foul language in it, so it could be offensive. Remember the Titans or Glory. I want you to choose one of those 4 movies, okay? And watch it, and then as you're watching it, be writing down this information so that you can share it with me, and that is your movie assignment, okay? So any questions on what's required of you on the movie assignment or the syllabus? Anyone? So I'm assuming we all have this figured out, and we know what's required of us, okay? So as I said, what we're doing is we are, in fact, let me find my book here. We are going to be, you're going to be reading your book on the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. And by the way, this is an excellent book. This is an excellent book that every leader should have in their library. And what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be letting John Maxwell, who is the author of the book, share on each law through a video. Each one is, I don't know, 5 to 12 minutes long. And after each law, first of all, he's doing the introduction, and then he goes into law 1, etc. After each law, we're going to be discussing it. So here's what I want you to do. As he's sharing, I want you to take notes for 2 reasons. Number 1, take notes for your benefit, because he'll say things in the teaching that he doesn't have in the book. And then secondly, I want you to, between each of these, we're going to discuss it, and you can bring up any concepts that you thought were very important, and even any that you question or you need more clarification on. And then I will also be sharing thoughts out of what he said, and so you can be taking notes on that. So going to be a fun time. I really enjoy this class. I really enjoy this material. So that being said, we're going to go to the introduction right now, and let's listen to him and gather some valuable information. This was videoed probably 15 years ago or more, maybe 20, but excellent material.
Great joy that I spend a few hours with you teaching you the 21 irrefutable laws of leadership. And I welcome every one of you here today because this lecture has potential to help you to become a better leader, to change your life. And somebody asked me recently, they said, John, how long did it take you to write the book, The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership? And I know I shocked them because I looked at him and said, about 20 years. Now, people know I'm slow, but that's really slow. What I was really saying to them is a book like The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership has to be birthed with a lot of experience. In other words, there are some books you don't write real quickly. There are some books you just kind of let them marinate and let them simmer so that you can truly bring out the laws. And the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership was kind of formed in not only the process of time, but about 5 years ago, I sat down one time and I asked myself, in leading people for 20, 25 years, what lessons have I learned about leadership? What principles, what thoughts have I learned that really would make a difference? And what I came to the conclusion was this, that there are a lot of wonderful leadership thoughts, or a lot of leadership principles. But when you start boiling down to laws, there are just a few of them. And I would like to talk to you about the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, and I would like to begin in your workbook by sharing with you how these laws were qualified. How did we qualify these laws? How did we turn around and say, okay, these are more than principles, these are more than leadership thoughts, these are truly laws. And I'm going to share with you in your notes the qualifying test to becoming a leadership law. For example, number one, these laws are not based on culture, gender, or age. Simply stated, these laws cross all type of cultures. And I know that because I have taught the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership in over 20 countries. And no matter whether I'm in India or the Philippines or South Africa, it doesn't matter. These laws cross right over. In other words, people there say, oh my goodness, that applies to me. And for it to be a law, it has to cross culture, it has to cross obviously gender, and it has to be able to be applied to all ages. The second qualifying test to becoming a leadership law is the fact that they relate and apply to all communities. When I say all communities, we've taught the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership in the business community, the academic community, the religious community. Hey, we've even taught the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership in the government community. Whoa, that's a real accomplishment, okay? And I remember a couple of years ago, the Department of Transportation Secretary called me up and said, I want you to come and we're going to bring in the top 500 people in the DOT all over America. And we've been studying 21 laws. We want you to come in and teach. And I had an incredible day with them. But these laws cross over all communities, all genders, all ages, all cultures. That's what makes the law. Qualifying test number 3, they're recognized by other leaders as leadership laws. In other words, one of the things I did in the process of writing this book and preparing this lecture is the fact I sat down with other leaders and I said, let me ask you a question. Do you think this is a leadership law? And often, many times, these key players would look at me and say, you know what, John, that's a great thought, but let me give you an exception. It doesn't work over here. And I'd say, hey, you're exactly right. It doesn't work over here. So other great leaders came around me and really helped me to form what I call these 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. And then qualifying test number 4. They stand the test of time. You can take these irrefutable laws of leadership and you can put them in this century. You can put them 5 centuries ago. In fact, I have a wonderful friend, Jim Garlow, who just finished writing a book, and it's an incredible book, where he takes the 21 irrefutable laws of leadership and he takes people throughout history, going back to thousands of years, and he talks about how many of them violated the law, how many of them applied the law and were successful with it. And I've had the time of my life just reading this book because all of a sudden I'm seeing the 21 laws as they operated in the times of Caesar and in the times of the Civil War. The laws, they stand the test of time. Now, let me make just 3 or 4 observations quickly about the laws. Observation number 1 is, and here's the good news, I love this one. These laws can be learned. you and I can learn these laws. And the reason I know that is because I've taught these laws for many, many years, and I could literally put names behind every law. In other words, I could literally sit down and say, with this law, I've mentored and taught people this. They've learned these laws. These laws can be learned. Now, just take a moment with the studio audience here. Here's what I want you to know. As I go through the 21 laws of leadership with you, there's some you're going to do well, there's some you aren't going to do well. Don't get discouraged, because you can learn the law. You can apply yourself, and you can learn it. In fact, let's just take a time out for a moment. Look at your neighbor and tell your neighbor, even you can learn these laws. Go ahead and tell them that. Even you. In fact, look at your neighbor, look back at your neighbor and say, in fact, this is the reason I brought you today. Yeah. I was certainly hoping that you could learn these laws. Okay. The second observation I want to make is this. These laws stand alone. What I mean by that is, it's possible in law number 2 that you don't do well. Law number 3, you do well. It's not like building a house where you put brick upon brick. They truly do stand alone. And when I say they stand alone, each law has the possibility of helping you, or each law has the possibility of hurting you, but they're not dependent upon other laws. They don't build on each other. They all stand alone. Observation number 3 is that these laws carry consequences. Now, let me explain to you exactly what I mean by when I say these laws carry consequences. About a year ago, I was lecturing on the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, and a guy came up to me, and I'll never forget, he looked at me and said, I just finished reading your book. He said, I just want you to know, John, I don't agree with one of your laws. And when he told me that, I looked at him, and I smiled, and I said, I don't care. And that kind of threw him for a loop, because I think he thought I would care. And he looked at me and said, what do you mean you don't care? I said, I don't care if you don't agree with one of those laws. He said, well, what do you mean by that? I said, well, they're laws. Whether you agree with them or not, it really doesn't matter. It's kind of like the law of gravity. Somebody coming up to you and say, I just don't buy into the law of gravity. I don't care. But I tell you what, go up to the 3rd-story window, jump out. In a millisecond, you will buy into the law of gravity. See, the laws are the laws. And the laws, they don't ask you to buy into them. They just tell you that if you do buy into them, you're going to prosper. And if you don't buy into them, it's going to hurt you. These laws have consequences. So let me tell you one of my favorite stories. It's the story of 2 guys. They weren't good golfers. I love to play golf, so I love golf stories. Okay, 2 guys. They're not good golfers, and they get up on the first tee, and the first guy, he sets it up, and he tees it up. He hits the ball, and much to his surprise, for the first time in his life, he hits the ball right down the middle of the fairway. I mean, he is so excited. In fact, this guy's such a terrible golfer. He has never seen his ball after he hit it. This is the first time he can literally say, there's my ball, there's my ball. So he's walking down the fairway with his buddy, and he's so excited because he's in the middle of the fairway. And much to his surprise, the ball is not only in the middle of the fairway. When he gets there, about 200 yards out, it has rolled up on a 4-inch anthill. It's teed up. He grabs his 3-wood, looks at his buddy, and says, this is of God. Swings as hard as he can, misses the whole ball, and kills 5,000 ants. Miracle of miracles, that golf ball that was up here stayed on top of the anthill. Now it's only 2 inches up. It's still teed up. He grabs his 3-wood. He says, I get a second chance. Swings as hard as he can the second time, misses the ball again, and kills 4,998 ants. There are 2 ants left. One ant looks at the other and says, I don't know about you, but if we're going to survive, we had better get on the ball. What I found about leadership is there's consequences. And as you go through this series of training on the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, you don't have to agree with the laws. You don't have to even like the laws. But I'm here to tell you, they'll make you or break you. They'll bless you or curse you. And if you learn how to apply them to your life, it'll be amazing how successful you become. And the last observation I want to make about these leadership laws is that these laws are the foundation of leadership. They're the foundation of leadership. This is what you build your leadership life on. So, I'm ready to go. Let me ask you a question. Are you ready to go? Law number 1.
Okay. Let me stop right there before we get to the law of the lid. Not going to say a lot about that, just the fact that these laws work, and they work anywhere, and they work if you work them. And so I really like the way that he said it doesn't matter your culture, your gender, or your age. Why? Because they're laws. And laws work. Okay, so that's all I wanted to say there. But now I want you to be sure you're taking some good notes. In my opinion, the law of the lid is one of the most important of all of them. I mean, they're all important to a degree. But I think if you miss this first one, you've missed them all. So let's listen and let's allow him to share.
The law of the lid. The law of the lid says leadership determines the level of effectiveness. Now, this is a huge law, and although I say one law is not more important than any other law, here's what I do want you to know. If I would start off with any law, I must start off with this one, and here's why. Because if you can buy into this law in the next 5 to 6 minutes as I talk to you, if you can buy into this law, you'll have a great passion to learn all the others, and let me explain why. I'm going to illustrate the importance of this law by using my hands. Watch this for a moment. It's kind of a visual illustration. Let's say, for example, my left hand here represents my ability to lead people. This is how well John Maxwell leads people. This is my leadership lid. Okay. If this hand is my leadership, and if this hand is my business, in other words, my company, my department that I'm overseeing, okay, whatever I'm in charge of, here's what I want you to understand. My department, my business, my company, my organization, here's what I want you to understand. The lid of my leadership will never allow my business to get any higher. It'll never allow in other words, if this truly is my leadership lid, my company, my business, my department, my organization, whatever it is, it can never get any higher than the lid of my leadership. In other words, your leadership, my leadership, our leadership lid, whatever it is going to literally control and determine the size of our business. Now, this is huge. If I were sitting where you are right now and I was taking notes, what I'd be saying to myself is something like this. Since the law of the lid says that my leadership is going to determine my effectiveness, the most important thing that I can do in my life is learn how to become a better leader. Let me explain to you. Remember, I've already said to you the laws can be learned. We've already realized that you can learn these laws, okay? In fact, you told your neighbor, you can learn these laws. Now, let me explain to you what could happen. Let's say from a 1 to a 10, my leadership lid is a 4. Well, what that means is if I'm a 4 as a leader, then my business, my organization is going to be a 3. Now here's what's not going to happen. If I'm a 4 as a leader, my business or my organization is not going to keep going above that lid and go to a 4, 5, 6, 7. It's never happened. In the history of mankind, the organization has not grown beyond the lid of the leadership of that organization. The leadership contains and controls and determines the size of the business. Now, so if I'm a 4, you look like a great smart audience, so I'm going to ask you a question. If I'm a 4 as a leader, what's my organization going to come to that I lead? But what's my number? 3, 4 max, isn't that right? Can't be any higher. What it's not going to be, it's not going to be a 5, 6, or 7 because my lid is a 4. Now, the good news is I can learn to lead. So here's what I'm saying. If I'm a 4 as a leader and I've got a 3, 3.5, maybe, max, maybe a 4, I doubt, company or organization, here's what I want you to see. If I go from a 4 and I start learning leadership to a 5, to a 6, to a 7, all of a sudden, now look what happens. I have capacity for growth. I have potential for growth. My company can go from a 3 to a 4 to a 5 to a 6. In other words, here's what I'm saying. You can literally double the size of your department. You can just double the size of your company by just lifting your leadership lid. And every one of you here, everyone that would watch these tapes, I want to say this to you. You can lift your leadership lid. But everything, remember this, everything rises and falls on leadership. By the way, where I learned this, when I lived in San Diego, California, I had a fellow by the name of Don Stevenson who was my mentor. And he was the president of Global Hospitality, and that Global Hospitality literally would buy, they would buy resorts that were going bankrupt. Resorts like La Costa, Greenleaf, any kind of major resort across America that was going under financially. What we found was that this company, Global Hospitality, they would come in and they would buy the company. Okay, now get the picture. Here we are. I'm sitting out with Don Stevenson about every other month. He's mentoring me, and I asked him one day, I said, Don, when you go buy a bankrupt company, a resort that's going under, are there some things that you always do? And I'll never forget. He looked at me and said, John, he said, yes, there is. He said, when we go into a bankrupt company, he said, there are two things we always do. And I looked at him and said, two things? He said, yes, absolutely. He said, the two things we always do is, he said, first of all, we train all the people that are in the service business, the employees. In other words, the guys that are out there when the cars pull up and they're unloading the luggage. He said, we train them all in relational skills. In other words, we train them, we talk to them about how to remember names, how to get along with people. And he said, the reason we do that, the waiters, the waitresses, the people behind the checkout counter, on the grounds. And he said, what we found is 90% of the people who do not return to the resort after their first visit had a bad experience with the employees of the organization. They weren't treated with great respect, or they weren't taken care of well. And so he said, what we do is we go through and we train all the people. Now what I'm doing, I'm sitting there and I'm taking notes, and so I'm writing down to me, make sure that you've trained all the people in your organization. Okay. He said, the second thing we do is, he said, every time we take over a bankrupt company, he said, we fire the president. And I don't write that one down. And I look at him and say, what do you mean you fire the president? He said, John, he said, every time we take over companies going under, he said, we fire the president. I said, well, it seems a little harsh, isn't it? I mean, don't you first go see him? You know what I mean? Go sit in the office, light a fire in the fireplace, hold hands, do a little kumbaya. You know what I'm talking about? No. He said, John, he said, we fire the president. And I'm pressing him a little bit more. And I couldn't remember because he was eating the salad. He was just looking down, eating the salad, talking to me. And he stops, puts his fork down. Now he's looking at me. It's a little bit ticked that I'm not catching this, And he's looking at me and said, John, listen to me. He said, if the president were any good, the company wouldn't be going bankrupt. The first thing we do is fire the president. I remember finally saying, fire the president. You know what he was teaching me that day? He was teaching me the law of the lid. What he was really saying to me is that it's an absolute fact that in any organization, everything rises and falls on leadership. And the leadership of that organization will determine the size of that organization. And so therefore, when you have a good company that's thriving and doing great business and excelling, you've got good leadership. And when you've got a company that's stagnant and it's going downhill and it's not going well, I can promise you, you have bad leadership. Everything rises and falls on leadership. Now, let me tell you what that law did for me as a leader. That day, when I walked out from the table, after listening to Don talk to me, that day, what I realized was that I was responsible as a leader. That I had to now take responsibility for my organization. I had to take responsibility for my people. I had to take responsibility for the success of my company. That I couldn't go and blame someone else. I read a statement recently that's just powerful. Here's what it is. It's easier to go from failure to success than it is to go from excuses to success. That's a tremendous statement. And whenever as a leader, I begin to make excuses for why my company is not doing well or why my organization is not doing well, and I began to go and say, well, you know what I mean, we're in the wrong location and we got the wrong people. And listen, cut the excuses out. If you're the leader, learn to lead and take responsibility for that leadership. Here's the good news. You can grow as a leader. You can become a better leader than you are right now. That I promise you. But take responsibility. Because the law of the lid says the organization or the company cannot rise any higher than your level of leadership. The law of the lid is a huge law. So if you'll notice in your workbook, I have some questions. Just some simple questions. Questions that I want you on your own to ask yourself. Questions such as, what is the lid number on my leadership? From a 1 to a 10, where am I? Question number 2. I love this one. Would those around me agree with my assessment? Get your leadership team together. Hey, by the way, let me just say this. If, when you're kind of evaluating yourself, if you put down that you're probably from a 1 to a 10, you're probably like a 9.5. And you ask your team, you get your team together and say, what do you think my number is? And they say you're a 2.5. You're probably missing something. So let those around you evaluate and assess your leadership. And then question number 3, what is my plan to increase my lid number, my leadership lid number? How am I going to grow it? Because I have found that this is absolutely key. The ability to prepare and do curriculum like we're doing here so that you can grow as a leader. I mean, how am I going to grow my leadership lid? And question number 4, what are the lid numbers of those that work with me? That's a great question. Those that are around you close, because one of the laws we'll study in the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership is the law of the inner circle. And the law of the inner circle says those closest to me determine the level of my success. So what are the lid numbers of those around me? And then question number 5, what is my plan to increase their lid numbers? What's my plan? How am I going to increase the lid numbers of those around me? Law number 1, the law of the lid.
Okay, the law of the lid. Very interesting concept. You can only lead people to your level. Any thoughts, any questions? What impacted you there? What questions might you have? You're all in leadership to some degree. How does that speak to you?
I think to the last part, what he was talking about is just owning it up, not making any excuses. And I think that's one of the things is when you're a leader and you have a team, it's I guess it's kind of easier for you to just blame the team or just say man, they have so much on their plate, they don't have enough room to, for me, for example, young adults, me and Isaiah are over young adults. And so we have a great team, but they are tied to so many things in their own church campus. One's over the children's, the other is over youth. And so it sometimes can feel like they're not doing enough, but they're at their max, And so sometimes for me, I kind of just man, I wish they were more like this or can do this, or wish they had more availability, etc. And so it's just another reminder of just hey, no matter what, it's your responsibility. And, whether it's to find more available people or whether to take on some more load on yourself. But no matter what, it's your responsibility. Don't make excuses and just get it done.
Yeah. And like Sierra put there, where he said it's easier to go from failure to success than excuses to success. Boy, that is a powerful statement. And ownership sets an example. One of the greatest college basketball coaches of all time made this statement. He said, when we win the game, it's because of the players. When we lose the game, it's because of me. Boy, that's a powerful statement. How many coaches have we seen try to blame the team because they lost the game? When the coach basically said, when they win, it's all about them. When they lose, it's all about me. What was he doing? Taking ownership, taking responsibility rather than shirking responsibility. Anyone else? A couple of the other things he said there that were vital, and we've all heard this before, but everything rises or falls on leadership. Everything rises or falls on leadership. I thought it was interesting, they always fire the president. Because if he was any good, they wouldn't be going bankrupt. He'd have figured out a way to change things. Something else that I thought was very important, first of all, is yes, we all need to do a self-evaluation, determine what our lid number is. And that's why it's important that we continue to grow. We continue to read so we can continue to lead. We continue to learn so that we can raise our level and continue to lead. So we always have to stay ahead of those we're leading. But I thought it was also interesting where he talked about the fact that you need to determine the lid level of those that are under you. Why do you determine the lid level of those that are under you? As he said, it's going to be one of the further laws that your inner circle, the law of the inner circle. And he's going to be dealing with that. Let's see, what law is that? The law of the inner circle. Law number 11. We'll get to the law of the inner circle. And he deals with the fact that those around you can cause you to go higher or go lower. And finally, what's my plan? And I think each of us should be asking two questions here. What's my plan to grow my lid level? And what's my plan to grow the lid level of those that are working with me? Without a plan, you're going to fail. So what's my plan? As Katrina was talking about a few minutes ago, it's easy to put blame. It's easy to point fingers. It's easy to say, well, if I had different people, I would be able to do better. But the issue is either get new people or help those people grow. Sometimes, using what Katrina was talking about, sometimes the way you help those people grow and become a more valuable asset in your ministry is for you to reach out and help them in their ministry. Just a thought. Just a thought. And let me tell you something. Ministry is not easy. Ministry is hard. You say, well, what about the Holy Spirit helping you? Well, yeah, he helps us. If he couldn't, it would be impossible. But because he helps it, it's possible, but it's still hard. As an example, tonight after this class, I had a class. I got up this morning. I'm not complaining. I'm just sharing. We're talking about ministry being hard. I got up this morning at 5:30 in order to start teaching a class at 6:45. Tonight, you know that I've been teaching since 5:30. We're going to conclude here around 9:30. At 10 o'clock, my wife and I are going to be on Zoom ministering to students in Manila. Not maybe Manila, some of them in Manila, but the Philippines. There's a whole bunch of students in the Philippines. They have changed their chapel time to be 1 o'clock their time Tuesday so that we can teach them at 10 o'clock tonight. And we're going to be investing in those students in the Philippines tonight. Thursday, I'm investing on Zoom in students in Ghana. It's not a class, it's just one of my students from another school from Ghana asked me if I would be on their Zoom. And so I said, well, is it students? And he said, well, some of them are students from the school, some are students from the University of Ghana, and some are business people. And he's asked me to come on Zoom and encourage them. Why am I saying that? Ministry is hard. I honestly, in one sense, don't want to get on Zoom at 10 o'clock tonight. My body doesn't want to. And my mind maybe doesn't want to. But that's what God's called me to. So sometimes we have to go above and beyond. We have to give that extra mile in order to build people. Just a thought. Any other questions or comments? No other thoughts? Okay, let's go to law number 2.
The second law is the law of influence. And the law of influence says the true measure of leadership is influence. Nothing more, nothing less. I love this law, and when I teach it, I find sometimes it throws an emotional curve to people. Let me explain to you what I mean. You see, the law of influence says leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. I find most people want to attach other definitions to leadership. They want to say things like, John, I think leadership is title. And by the way, I have a leadership title. Or I think leadership is position. And by the way, I have a leadership position. I find that a lot of people want to tie all kinds of definitions into leadership. But let me just tell you, leadership is influence. Nothing more, nothing less. Let me explain it this way. The person with the most influence at any given time, for any given reason, in any given group, is the leader of the pack. Now, what that means is there are times when influence changes. There's times when one person will have more influence than another, but when you get onto another issue or another subject, that another person that leadership may shift a little bit because we are not all strong in all areas. And so therefore, when I'm talking about leadership as influence, what it shows is there's a fluidness of leadership, and that leadership doesn't always stay with one person. In fact, let me give you a perfect example of this. As we study together the 21 irrefutable laws of leadership, one of the first things you're going to realize is this. You do not do well in all 21 laws. Okay? For those that are in the studio today, I just want you to know, you won't do well on all 21 laws. Now, here's what's going to happen. As you evaluate yourself on each law, here's what's going to happen. You're going to have a tendency to think that when you do well on a law, you're going to say to yourself, now that is a true law of leadership. Oh, John's right on there. Oh, that is so good. He's just, that is true. And on the laws that you don't do so well, you're going to say, that may not be a law of leadership. Now what you're going to find is you're going to do well on some laws, you're going to not do well on some laws. Hey, that's the way it is. In fact, there are going to be some laws, I'll point them out to you, that I don't do well on. Now here's what I want you to see. That's why it's important for you not only to understand leadership, but that's why it's important for you to have a leadership team. That's why it's important for you to train leaders around you. And here's why. In fact, I have seen over the last 3 decades, in the 80s, I saw that the great word was management. Everybody talked about management. Peter Drucker did some great things on management. When we got to the 90s, in corporate America, it changed from management to leadership. Now, there's a reason for that. See, managers assume things will always stay the same. Leaders assume things will always change. So in the 80s, when things were stable, wow, we needed managers to kind of control and to make sure everything was being taken care of. In the 90s, when we got to leadership, all of a sudden it drastically changed. We needed guys and gals and men and women that were fast-paced and could change and embrace change. And I can tell you, as now we've entered into a whole new century, I can promise you, we've gone from management in the 80s to leadership in the 90s to now, I can tell you, we're going, as we've entered in a whole new, not only decade, but a whole new century, we're going now to team leadership. And the reason we're going to team leadership is because the 21 irrefutable laws of leadership will teach you and me very simply that you just don't do all 21 things well. You don't, I don't. Now, the moment we understand that, I've got to have a leadership team. And the reason that I have to have a leadership team is because I need people around me that can absolutely make up for my weaknesses and can complement me. Does that make sense? So, for example, as we're teaching through here, here's what I want you to see. As I walk down here and just kind of use maybe my front row for an example, because this will work. Let's say, for example, this is my leadership team. My name's John. What's your name? Okay, Chuck, perfect. Let's say we're in one of the laws, and let's say Chuck does a better job at one of the laws than I do. One of the reasons we need to evaluate ourselves, and one of the reasons we need to have a leadership team around us is because we all need to know that if I get to the law of navigation, by the way, that's a law I'll teach later on. That's a law I'm weak in. I'm not a good navigator. What I have to realize is, but let's say Chuck is I'm a 2 as a navigator, okay? I mean, just trust me, you don't want me to navigate. I'm kind of like Mr. Magoo, okay? So you don't want that. You don't want Mr. Magoo running the ship now. But Chuck, let's say he's a 9. What that means is when we get to something in our organization that requires navigating, What we do is I take, and now Chuck has more influence. Because if you know Chuck's a better navigator than me, who are you going to follow? See, for too long, we've said, follow me because I have the position. How ridiculous. Follow me because I have the title. I'm the president. I'm the one that's over everybody. Follow me. That's not a good reason to follow somebody. You ought to follow a person because they're competent. You ought to follow a person because they're best. And the secure leaders, and I'll talk about the law of empowerment. That's another law. But the secure leaders look around and say, look, gang, let me tell you something. Chuck's a better navigator than me. So when it comes to navigating the day-to-day process, and we've got to navigate maybe for a 3-6 month period and some issue in the organization, Chuck's going to have the ball, and I'm going to follow Chuck, because all great leaders are not only leaders, they're great followers, because they appreciate the value that true leadership brings. Does that make sense? So leadership is influence. I may have influence in some areas. Chuck will have influence in other areas. What's your name? Bridget will have influence. In other words, the person that is the best leader should have the most influence in that given area. Make sense? So look around you and ask yourself, who is influential and in what areas are they influential? That's why several years ago, I designed a way for people to understand influence as it pertains to leadership that would make sense to them. And in your notes, if you'll take just a moment for me, I want to draw your attention to the 5 levels of leadership. And when I use the word leadership, I could use the word influence, that I use them interchangeably. And what I want to do is I want to walk you through this, because this is essential for you to understand where you are as far as what level of influence you have and where you should go to increase your influence level. For example, let's go down to the very bottom step, okay? On that first lowest level, put the word position. Now, that's the lowest level of influence. That's the lowest level of leadership. In other words, when you and I go to an organization, we get a title, we get a position. Now, right inside that step is another blank. I encourage you to put the word rights, because that's the key word when you're on the position level of leadership. Let me explain. When you and I have a title, when you and I have a position, we get certain rights that come with the position. Is that true? They'll look at you and say, you're going to be over these 6 people. This is going to be your department. These are your people that you're responsible for. Okay. In other words, at level number 1, people follow you because they have to. In other words, people say, why are you following that person? Well, it's because they're the boss. They're the leader. I have to. In other words, I'm under them. I really don't have any choice. Now, let me share something with you. Every one of us in this studio, every one of you that watch me do the leadership training, anybody that's just observing what I'm saying right now and understanding these levels of leadership, every one of us have had to follow people that weren't good leaders. Isn't that true? How many of you we don't need to call out names, okay, let's not get personal here. How many of you have at one time in your business life or your work life had to follow somebody and they were just a lousy leader? I mean, that's absolute go. That's 100% in the studio. Let me ask you this question. How many of you are sitting beside that person right now? Don't go there. Don't go there. The first question is a leadership question. The second question is an IQ question. Okay, don't raise your hand on the second one. That would not be a good thing. Okay, now here's what I'm saying. Every one of us have had to follow people that were not good leaders. Why? Because they had the position and title. This year I'm going to be speaking to the West Point. I'm coming in for 2.5 days. I'm going to be speaking to all the cadets. I'm going to be speaking to the leadership, and they want me to talk about the 21 irrefutable laws of leadership because they teach it there. What's interesting is my challenge as I go to West Point will be I'm going to teach the 21 irrefutable laws of leadership, and so much of the service area is based on rank. And what they're going to have to understand, and what I'm going to do my best to teach them, of course, they're very, very sharp, so they're going to understand it very quickly, probably much better than I ever could, is they're going to have to understand that just because people follow you because you have a position doesn't mean that you're a great leader. Does that make sense? Level number 2 is the permission level. Let me walk you through the rest of these very quickly. And the key word on the inside of level number 2 is relationships. At level number 2, people follow you because they want to. By the way, just stop for a moment and look at your notes. There's a world of difference between 1 and 2. In step number 1, people follow you because they have to. In step number 2, people follow you because they want to, because now you've developed relationships with them. Level number 3 is the production level. And the key word is results. Basically, what I'm saying at level number 3 is this. At level number 3, people follow you because of what you've done for the organization. In other words, it's growing. The profit's better. The morale is higher. Okay, now all of a sudden people are following you because you've been successful in the organization. That's level 3. Level number 4 is the people development level. That's always my goal. When we talk about a couple of the laws of leadership, I'll talk more about people development. But at people development, the key word is reproduction. Oh, yes. People follow you there because of what you have done for them. What you have done for them as individuals. In other words, on level number 3, they follow you because of results and what you've done for the company. At level number 4, they follow you because of what you have done for them. Now they're personally growing. Now they can say, I'm a better person. I'm more effective in my job because you've equipped them, you've given them tools. In the last level is what I call the personhood level. And the key word there is respect. And basically, you have done it so well with so many people for so long that people just automatically put you up there. So it's a wonderful level to be on. And I would encourage you on law number 2, just to take some time and look at the questions and ask yourself questions about influence and how you can more effectively influence others. The 5 levels of leadership, which is a lecture in itself, has its own training video, because I spend a great deal of time really helping people work through those 5 laws. But for right now, the law of influence says there are 5 levels of influence, and you need to know where you are, because leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less.
Okay, let's talk about law number 2, the law of influence. Leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. What are some key things that he said that impacted you? Or maybe some questions you have on what he said? Anyone? You need to have a relationship with people before leading them correctly. That's sometimes hard for me to do. Well, yeah, I mean, it depends upon our personalities. Our personalities play into this. But even if our personality is not as it should be in that area, we have to do we need to change. We need to make the needed changes. And because if you don't have relationship with people, they feel used. They feel like you're only using them and getting out of them what you need, rather than helping them grow and become what God wants them to become. Devin said it was good when he said that just because you have a position or title doesn't mean you're a good leader. The argument can be made that you get the position for a reason. Yeah, it can. But again, sometimes people get position. Let's take like in our district, for example. Sometimes people are voted into our district not as much because they're a good leader, but because people know them. Sometimes, as an example, let me give you this illustration. And I think I might have given this to you in another class at one time, I'm not sure. But here's one reason I have a problem with our churches voting on people to be board members. And I'll give you an example. One time I was in a church, it was a large church, and on a particular Sunday, they had 5 men stand up and said that these are the 5 men that have been nominated for board members. We're going to be voting on them next week, and the 3 with the highest number are going to be the board members. And I looked to my wife and I said, I can already tell you which 3 are going to be elected. And I named the 3. And the next week when we had the election, those were the 3 that were put in. How did I know? Here's how I knew. It's a huge church where a lot of people don't know each other, but those 3 were ushers. And those 3 were a lot of times out in the foyer shaking hands with people. And so when the people voted, I knew that because they only knew those 3, but they didn't know the other 2, that those 3 would be voted in. What is it? In a sense, it's a popularity contest. Okay? So just because a person is given a position does not mean they're a good leader. Sometimes because they're good leaders, they're given the position, right? Which is what Devin was saying there. That, but just because they have the title doesn't mean they're a good leader. It goes back to law number 1, which was one of the first things we always do is we fire the president. Because if the president were a good leader, the business wouldn't be in the condition it's in. But they had the title, but they didn't have the ability. Okay, so anyone else? I want to pick up on what he said here about the fact that you do not do well on all 21 laws. There is nothing wrong with that. Very few people are strong in all 21. In fact, I would say if you're strong in 15 to 17 of them, you're a very strong leader. Because we all have our blind spots, we all have our weaknesses, and we can't all be strong in everything. So what do? We listen to these laws, we evaluate where we are on a scale of 1 to 10 with each one, and let's say let's just say, I'm giving us the benefit of the doubt, with 15 of them we're real strong. But with 7 of them, we're not as strong. If I were you, I would invest my time on the 2 of the weakest, 2 of the 7 weak ones. I would invest my time on the 2 that I have the highest level on. What do I mean by that? I'm going to have a greater return on investing in the 2 that I'm the highest on in the weak areas than the 5 that I'm the lowest on. Does that make sense? In other words, should we invest in our weaknesses? Yes. Should we work on our weaknesses? Yes. But there's some weaknesses there's no use working on. As an example, let's say that you've always wanted to be on the worship team, but you can't carry a tune. Doesn't do you a lot of good to work on that weakness, because you're never going to get to the level you want to be on that worship team. Why? You're physically not wired that way. So, but you can work on other areas of weakness that maybe is not the same type. Yeah, and Stephen there, so that's why I liked what he said about good leaders are good followers. If you find a person that can't follow, I guarantee you they're not a good leader. You say, well, give me chapter and verse. How about the centurion? His daughter was dying, and he said to Jesus, you don't even need to come to my house. Just speak the word only, because I am a person of influence that has others under me. I understand authority. All you have to do is speak the word. He was a good follower. Okay? So in order to be a good leader, you've got to be a good follower. How about this concept he brought out? Manage your think things will always stay the same. Leaders think things will always change. Managers think things will always stay the same. Leaders think things will always change. And that is very true. And I'm going to make a statement that he didn't make. In my opinion, that's why we need both. We need leaders and we need managers. We need leaders to take people where they've never been before, and we need managers to manage well what we have. Okay? All great leaders are great followers. I'd written that down as well. And then the 5 levels of leadership: the position, the permission, the production, the people development, and the personhood. And can you see that in that flow, it moves from task to people? It moves from task to people. Position, permission, production, people development, and personhood. And as important as it is that we get things done, that we have production, what's more important is that we're building people and developing people in the process of production. Any other questions or thoughts? Just looking at the ones I can see, would you agree with me this is invaluable information when it comes to church leadership? Invaluable. Okay. Okay, we'll go to number 3.
The third law is the law of process. The law of process says leadership develops daily, not in a day. This is an incredible law. I love to teach it, and the reason I love to teach it is because if a person can understand process, they're going to be very effective as a leader. But if they don't understand the process of becoming a leader, they're going to get very frustrated. Let me explain to you. Many times when I do leadership conferences, when we have a Q&A period of time, probably the most common question asked me when I do leadership conference, somebody raise their hand and say, John, here's a question. Are leaders born? And whenever they ask me the question, are leaders born? I always look at them and I always say, of course they are. Think about that question. I've never met an unborn leader. Don't particularly want to either, thank you very much. Now, what they're really asking is, they're not asking are leaders born. What they're really asking is, are there leaders that, are people when they're born, they kind of got it? You know what I'm saying? They got it, and are there people when they're born, they don't got it? And I suppose if you got it, you lead, and if you don't got it, you get in line. You know what I mean? And hope there's a water fountain at the end somewhere, okay? That's a very important question. Because what I have found is this, and this is so huge. What I have found is there are a lot of people who just think you either have it or you don't have it. And I'm going to tell you right now, that is not true. There are people that have leadership leanings. Of course there are. Just like there are people when they're born, they have kind of musical leanings. So there are leanings toward leadership that some people have that other people don't have. But anyone can learn to be a leader. In fact, that's why I have such a passion to teach leadership. That's why I have such a passion to teach these laws. Because if you learn these laws, it becomes absolutely amazing how well you're going to be able to learn to lead. So let me take a moment and explain to you a couple important thoughts in this law. In your notes, we overestimate the event and we underestimate the process. I have found this to be very common with people in leadership. They overestimate what an event will do for them. They come to a leadership conference or they read a leadership book and they say, oh my goodness, this is so good. And this is going to make me a leader. This is going to change me. Now, let me just explain to you the difference between the event and the process, because this will help you understand the law process. For example, when you go to a leadership event, I'm talking about like going to a leadership conference, reading a leadership book, okay, listening to a leadership lecture. Okay, when you go to a leadership event, that encourages decisions. That's what it does. In other words, you're going to say, oh my goodness, I know it's important for me to lead, so I'm going to make a decision. For example, when I taught you the law of the lid and said that everything's going to rise and fall on your leadership, many of you made a choice probably. You said, oh my goodness, then if that's the truth and my lid of leadership is going to determine how effective I am in my business, I'm going to have to learn to lead. That's a decision. Events encourage decisions. The process encourages development. The emphasis in process is continuing to grow and develop yourself. The event motivates people. We all love to come and be motivated and encouraged, but the process matures people. And we're wanting to mature you as a leader. To motivate you, yes, but mature you is much more important. The event is a calendar issue. You say, okay, on this certain date, I'm going to go to an event and learn some leadership, whereas the process is a culture issue. It's being in an environment or a culture that encourages you every day to learn, every day to grow, every day to develop yourself as a leader. The event challenges people. I find that I'm challenged when I go to leadership events, but the process changes people. Why? Because you can't change overnight. You can make a sudden decision, but you can't make a sudden change. That's a process. And there's a lot of difference between that. You see, here's what I think. I think the event is easy, and I think the process is difficult. And I want to encourage you, as you're watching these training tapes, to understand that it's a process. And it's not one day, one time, one book, one lecture that's going to change your life. But it's going through the process of doing that. And the reason that leadership must be a process is because leadership is many-faceted. In fact, think about it for a moment. There are 21 irrefutable laws of leadership. Just the very fact there are 21 laws of leadership tells you you just can't absorb it, or you can't learn it, or you can't apply it instantly. I was doing a leadership lecture in, a couple years ago, doing a conference. And I'll never forget, during the break, I was signing books, and this kid came up to me, and he's just out of college, and kind of probably a business major, and he was all excited about leadership, what he was learning. And I could see his passion. I love kids because, they just have great passion. So he came up to me, and he kind of gets in my face a little bit, and he said, okay, John, he said, I love this leadership stuff. So I've been listening to you all day. So I got a question. I said, what's your question? He said, what's the one thing I need to know about leadership? I thought, oh my. So I sucked it up to get energy. Here we go. I got to match this kid's intensity. So I looked at him and I kind of got in his face. And I said, the one thing you need to know to be a great leader is that there is more than one thing you need to know to be a great leader. In fact, I said there are 21 things that you need to know to be a great leader. Now, you see, here's the kid. What's he doing? He's trying to take leadership and condense it. He's basically wanting me to fast food leadership. He's wanting to come to the window of leadership and get a sack of leadership. You know what I'm saying? And take off down the road with a sack of leadership and kind of eat it on the way and come out of the car as a great leader. Can't happen. Why? Because leadership is many faceted. Let me explain. Look at your notes for a moment. We've already understood that, first of all, leadership is influence. So it certainly is the ability to influence people, but it's more than influence. I can show you people that have influence, but they're not great leaders. Isn't that true? Well, it's also, secondly, navigation. The ability to take people from point A to point B to point C. So there's a navigating principle of leadership, and yet I could show you people that are tour guides that aren't good leaders. Or thirdly, it's empowerment. It's the ability to take people and empower them. Of course it is. To be able to put belief in people and let them go to a higher level on their own. But it's more than empowerment. Number 4, it's relationships. It's getting along with people. Yet I know people who get along with me very well, but they can't lead anything. Number 5, it's timing. There's a huge amount of timing that's involved in leadership, and the ability to understand timing. It's huge. In fact, there's a whole law on it. But it's more than timing. Number 6, it's momentum. If you do timing right, you get the big mo going for you. And it's the ability to sense and feel the surge of momentum in an organization, but it's more than momentum. It's more than just getting the big mo going for you. Number 7 is sacrifice. It's the ability to give up so you can go up. Of course it is. And yet I know people that they've sacrificed and they're still not great leaders. You see, you're beginning to catch this. Number 8, it's attitude. It's the way you think. And yet I know people have great attitudes that aren't great leaders. Now, let me just stop down. Here's what I think it's very obvious to all of us right now. It's very obvious to all of us. And that is, it's many-faceted. In other words, it's the ability to understand a lot of things that make you a well-rounded, mature leader. It's kind of like in the NFL and pro quarterbacks. It's kind of like a rookie quarterback coming into that major league. It's impossible for them the first year to be probably a great quarterback. There's just too much. I was up speaking the other day with the Cleveland Browns and Butch Davis and the crew, and they were talking to me, and I literally had a guy give me a 30-minute teaching on the quarterback and all they have to learn in their first year. And I thought, I was amazed. I thought, oh my goodness. It's, read the defenses and understand the offense and be able to sense the shifts and be able to change the play in a moment. It's a lot of stuff. Now, here's what I want you to know. I think that the problem is too many times we try to microwave leaders. We put them in a microwave, we get them in our company, and say, oh my goodness, I got to develop some leaders. I got this Maxwell stuff, he says develop leaders. So come here, I want you to be a leader. I think you can be a leader. Here, get in the microwave. We push them away, push a few buttons and zap them. By the way, because we microwave so many leaders, that's why we have so many Pop-Tart leaders running. If you got a lot of Pop-Tart people in your company, it's because you've been microwaving. We need to quit microwaving leaders. And we need to start crock-potting leaders. That's huge. One more thought about this tremendous law of process. That is, the secret of our success is discovered in our daily agenda. What we do every day is the secret to our success. Not what we do at one moment or not what we're going to do sometime. A couple of years ago, I wrote a book called Your Roadmap for Success. And I'll never forget when I wrote the book, my publisher wanted to call it Your Roadmap to Success. I said, no, you can't call it the Roadmap to Success because there's no such place as success is not a destination. It's a journey. It's a process. So many times we confuse true success with what I call recognition of success. It's like my friend one time said to me, he said, John, all my life I've worked hard at being an overnight success. Bingo. That's so key. It's a process. The law of process says leaders develop daily, not in a day.
Okay, the law of process. Talk to me. What are some concepts there that impacted you? Leadership develops daily, not in a day. What thoughts impacted you?
I like the analogy of Pop-Tart leader versus Crock-Pot leader. I just think that's a funny thing to remember. But, I agree, though, that we so often want the title more than we want to learn how to earn the title, I guess, if that makes sense. And the process is what grows us, but a lot of times because growing is uncomfortable, we don't want to do any of the work to get there.
Okay. Yeah, very good. Go ahead, Katrina.
I would also like to add just the thought process of that, or my thought process. I won't say the name of the church, but I was interning at a church where they did exactly that when it came to Pop-Tart leaders. Just like anyone that wants to be a leader, let's do it. Let's join an internship and you can be a leader. And so it kind of changed my mindset to when I started become a leader at my other church, so after leaving them, um, being over youth ministry, I had those same expectations for my leaders, and kind of expected them to already have everything going and everything ready and and so like just learning that like it takes time for them to grow themselves, takes time for them to learn those things, and I learned it the hard way, but I'm glad I learned it so that I don't have to repeat it over again. Um, but yeah, it's just remembering like, you know, the people that want to serve under you and that want to volunteer or be a leader, like not to have high expectations, but to continue to push them and grow them in a healthy way, you know?
Devin said we had a leadership lesson in the past about being content in the process of leadership. It's important because God is growing us and preparing us for what's next. Exactly. It is a process. It isn't overnight. It isn't a crock pot situation. Sierra, I think it's important to never think you've arrived at success, because that's the moment you'll stop growing. Yeah, we're always in process. Everything is process. I like the way he said that we overestimate the event and underestimate the process. You especially find that to be true in what I call event-centered churches. Some churches are everything's built on the event. They have one event after another, and it's an event-oriented church, and they overestimate the event, but they underestimate the process. And the process encourages development. The process changes people. May I say to you, and Devin sort of connected with it there a little bit, may I say to you, learn how to embrace the process. Don't fight the process, because it's the process that's going to get you where you need to be. Okay? And I enjoyed the way he talked about how leadership is many faceted. It involves all those things he discussed, timing and influence, etc. But you can have one without the other. And leadership is many faceted. Okay? As he said, there's just not one thing you need to learn about being a good leader. It's many faceted. But the thing that really impacted me was the last thing he said. The secret of our success is discovered in our daily agenda. The secret to our success is discovered in our daily agenda. If you don't believe that, just ask Mary, the mother of Jesus, who was going about minding her own business when an angel appeared to her and said, you're going to have a son that's going to deliver the world. She was going about her daily agenda. If you don't believe that, just ask Saul of Tarsus, who was on his way to persecute more Christians, was knocked off his feet by a light from heaven when he was going through his daily agenda and met the Savior of the world. All I'm saying is that the secret of your success is discovered in your daily agenda. If you will be faithful to the daily agenda, if you will be faithful to the process, you will find God in the midst of the humdrums of life. He's right there. But too often we miss the supernatural because we're looking for the spectacular. You can be so focused on the spectacular that you miss the supernatural. So the secret of your success is discovered in your daily agenda. The law of process. Leadership develops daily, not in a day. And I'm going to go back to something Katrina said a minute ago. And I don't want you to misinterpret what I'm saying. I'm recording this, so you can't say I said something I didn't say. I'm not saying that leadership is not important. Nor did I say that all of us cannot grow in our leadership abilities. We all have the capacity to grow in our leadership abilities. What I do believe is not everybody is called to be a leader of leaders. I believe everybody's called to leadership because we all have some circle that we can lead. But there is a push today for everybody being leaders. In fact, the push is so strong that there's more of a push for people in church to be leaders than to be pastors. And it's very possible for a person to be a tremendous and very effective pastor without being a leader or a strong leader of leaders. And so I think, based on what Katrina was talking about that church, and all they said was, you want to be a leader, well, sign up and be an intern. Signing on the dotted line to be an intern does not make you a leader. It's a process. And a painful one at that sometimes. Just saying. But it's good stuff. Okay, next one, the law of navigation.
Law number 4 is the law of navigation. And the law of navigation says anyone can steer the ship, but it takes a leader to chart the course. I've often described leadership in kind of 2 terms. There's what I call the art form of leadership, and then there's a technical form of leadership. The law of navigation is a technical form of leadership. It's very tangible. It's point A to point B to point C. For example, the law of timing or the law of intuition, that's art form of leadership. It's much more subjective. It's much harder to get your hands around it. But Jack Welch was exactly right when he said, a good leader remains focused. Controlling your destination is better than being controlled by it. So let's study for a few minutes the law of navigation. I brought with me something I read the other day that I just love. And I want to pass it on to you. So just kind of sit and relax for a moment. Let me just read you this I think, humorous story. A man in a hot air balloon realized that he was lost. He reduced altitude and spotted a woman below. He descended a bit more and he shouted, "Excuse me, can you help me? I promised a friend that I would meet him an hour ago, but I don't know where I am." The woman below replied, "You're in a hot air balloon, hovering approximately 30 feet above the ground. You're between 40 and 41 degrees north latitude and between 59 and 60 degrees west longitude." "You must be an engineer," said the balloonist. "I am," replied the woman. "How did you know?" "Well," answered the balloonist, "everything you told me is technically correct, but I have no idea what to make of your information. And the fact is, I'm still lost. Frankly, you've not been much help at all. If anything, you've delayed my trip." The woman below responded, "You must be in management." You can see the train coming, can't you? Says, "You must be in management." "I am," replied the balloonist. "But how did you know?" "Well," said the woman, "you don't know where you are or where you're going. You have risen to where you are due to a large quantity of hot air. You made a promise which you have no idea how to keep, and you expect people beneath you to solve your problems. And the fact is, you are in exactly the same position you were in before we met, but now somehow it's my fault." Isn't that great, huh? When I think of the law of navigation, trying to get from one point to another, there's one thing, of course, that we have to understand, and that is, if anybody is going to be a good leader and navigate, you have to know where you are. And again, I referred to on an earlier law, the Mr. Magoo thing. I mean, let me tell you something. When you get on the ship, you don't want to look up and see that the captain is Mr. Magoo. It just kind of is a little bit unsettling. And the reason for that is, in your notes, there are 3 statements I want to make. And the 3 statements are these. A leader is one who sees more than others see. That's a fact. That's part of leadership. What do leaders do? They see the big picture. Is that not true? But the second statement, a leader is one who sees farther than others see. In other words, a leader is a person who looks out and he can see distant horizon and has great vision. But the third thought I want you to know is that a leader is one who sees before others see. It's also a timing issue. And one of the qualities of a leader is you put them in a room, they sense things. They sense things quicker than others sense them. It's not an IQ issue. It's not that they're smarter. It's just the fact that they have leadership within them, and they sense a need before others sense a need. They sense an opportunity before others sense an opportunity. So what do leaders do? Especially if you're a good navigating leader, you see more than others see, you see farther than others see, and you see before others see. That's what good leaders do. Bill Eason said one time, realistic leaders are objective enough to minimize illusions. They understand that self-deception can cost them their vision. Or Max Dupree, my friend, said this. He said, the number one responsibility of a leader is to define reality. What I have found about great navigational leaders is they're highly realistic, because they realize they have the responsibility of taking other people on a trip where they have never gone before, and they understand that they have to have experience and success. In fact, there's a world of difference. Think about it for a moment. There's a world of difference between a travel agent and a tour guide. You know, a travel agent, they get your tickets for you, and they get brochures for you, and they send you on a trip. You know what? They send you and me on trips every day of places they've never been before. You know what I'm saying? They bon voyage, have a good trip, and here are your tickets, and hope everything turns out right. Well, what travel agents, they send you where they've never been before. But a tour guide, when you go to the place you arrived at this place, you have a tour guide. You know what a tour guide basically says, I'm going to take you where I've been many times before, and I'm going to tell you about what I know. See, the great navigating leaders are leaders who they've been there and they've done that. But they're not in a been there, done that. You know, haven't you run people who kind of go around, been there, done that, been there, done, and they're bored. You know what I'm saying? You kind of say, well, you've been there too many times. You've done that too many times. Are you with me? So we've seen the been there. No. The great navigational leaders, they're been there, done that, but their excitement is taking people with them on the journey. I was just last week with Jim Winokur, who was the first American to go climb Mount Everest. And when we're sitting down around the table and having a wonderful lunch together, and I was asking Jim about some of his experiences, I'm just listening because he just has incredible experiences. And I said, what are you most proud of? I mean, you've been to Mount Everest on more than one occasion, the top. I said, what are you most proud of? And he said, John, what I'm most proud of is, he said, I have taken more people to the top of Mount Everest than any other person. And I thought, there is a true navigator. There's a person who understands that my joy isn't getting to the top. Been there, done that. My joy is getting other people to go to the top with me. And think about it for a moment. That's what navigators do. How many of you have ever heard the expression, it's lonely at the top? Huh? You've heard that, haven't you? Now, every time we hear the expression, it's lonely at the top, we think that a leader said that. A leader didn't say that. Think about it for a moment. If you're lonely, if you're all by yourself at the top, you're not leading anybody. If you're at the top all alone, here's the thought. Get off of the top and go down to where the people are. Go down and find your team and take your team to the top with you. That's what leaders do. Doesn't that make sense? To help me, because I am weak in this law. I'm not an A to point B to point C. It's not a strength of mine. I'm more visionary. I developed something in the 70s. I'm talking about 25 years ago as a young leader, knowing I had a lot of leadership responsibilities and realizing I was leading people that were older than me, more experienced than me, because I was just young. I developed a wonderful process that's helped me to navigate that I want to give to you. And in your notes, I want to walk you through this wonderful, wonderful step-by-step process of how to plan ahead. Are you ready? The letter P. The letter P stands for predetermine your course of action. In other words, as a leader, what do? The first thing I do is I determine, where do I want to go? I don't wait till the crowd's saying, let's go somewhere, and then say, where do I want to go? What's a leader do? Leaders predetermine. They think before others think. They see before others see. They've got that leadership edge. So predetermine your course of action. The letter L, lay out your goals. Basically, goals are nothing more than stepping stones. They're a process. So when I say lay out your goals, what I'm talking about basically is this. Use each one of your goals as stepping stones. So if I use this little platform for a moment, my goal is to get back up to the bar stool, basically I said, okay, here's goal 1 and here's goal 2. In other words, lay out your goals, develop them. Now, as soon as you lay out your goals, letter A comes into being. Because as soon as you lay out your goals, the letter A stands for adjust your priorities. I found this to happen. Now, I've been doing this now for 25 years, and here's what I found to happen. I found that every time I lay out my goals and predetermine course of action, I realize I have to adjust my priorities. Because you know what I'm doing? I'm doing things that are never going to get me there. You follow me? And I say, oh my goodness, John, why are you doing this? Because if you're wanting to really get there, so this is your destination, you're carrying extra weight. So predetermine course of action, lay out your goals, adjust your priorities, okay. The letter N, notify key personnel. Very simple. Take your key personnel and sit down and talk to them and notify and share the vision. For example, if this is my team again, what I do is I sit down and say, hey, gang, here's what I'm thinking. Here's the dream. Here's the vision. What do you think? And if your team is good, you know what they'll do? They'll take what you give them and they'll give it to you back better than you gave it to them. Isn't that right? They always make it better. When anybody asks me, says, John, how do I know that I have a good team around me? I can tell you how you know you have a good team around you. Every time you give them something, they give it back to you at a higher level. They take and stretch and grow you. But you notify your key personnel. In other words, you have your key meeting. You have your meeting before the meeting. Oh, that's a huge lecture in itself. But you got to always have a meeting before the meeting, because if you don't have your meeting before the meeting, you're going to have a very bad meeting. Notify key personnel. Letter A, allow time for acceptance, because it's going to take a while. So allow time for acceptance. I can promise you, people change slowly. So give them time to kind of digest and process that in their own mind emotionally. Letter H, head into action. Get going. I mean, there comes a time you go. And by the way, leaders have a bias toward action. And so leaders love the head into action part. They say, okay, now it's time. We've been thinking and planning long enough. Let's go head into action. And as soon as you head into action, the letter E comes into place. Watch this one. Expect problems. The moment you create movement in the organization, the moment that you take action, expect problems. And somebody asked me one time in a conference, I raised their hand and said, John, why? Okay, help me out here. They said, when you say expect problems, why should I have problems when I head into action? I said, it's very simple. Motion causes friction. And the moment that you head into action, somebody realizes they're going to have to make changes. Head into action. Get going. Expect problems. I got problems. You got problems. We all got problems. Okay, expect those problems because they're going to happen. Okay? And as you expect those problems, and as you're moving forward, understand it's not because you haven't learned. It's not because you're being a bad leader. It's not because you haven't done things well. It's just because problems happen to all of us. Let me just take a little poll here. How many of you as a leader have at least one problem? I was talking to a leader recently, and he was complaining about the problems. I said, don't complain about the problems. I said, think about it. That's why you have a job. If everybody was doing the right thing, probably they wouldn't need you. This is a good thing that you have problems. But after expecting problems, always point to your successes. Always point to your successes, and the reason for that's very simple. Because you got somebody in the company that will point to your failures, okay? This gives hope to your people. This encourages your people. And then finally, the letter D, daily review your progress. Daily review it. Sit down and say, okay, how am I doing? Am I farther along today than I was yesterday? I have found that the secret of navigation is preparation. And the best navigating leaders are those who spend time preparing themselves so that they can effectively take their people on the trip.
Okay, questions, thoughts? Powerful material. The law of navigation. Anyone can steer the ship, but it takes a leader to chart the course. Any thoughts? Steve said, I like the analogy of the travel agent versus tour guide. That a great navigator has the experiences of what has been done, that he now can have the vision for what can be done. It reminds me of how our experiences of God gives us the vision and faith for miracles yet to come. Very true. Very true. Anyone else? The law of navigation, taking the people where they need to go. Okay? The leaders see more than others see, further than others see, and before others see. And then the acrostic of plan ahead was powerful. Adjusting your priorities being part of it. Notify key personnel. Have you learned yet? Have the meeting before the meeting. As he said, if you don't have the meeting before the meeting, you're going to have a bad meeting. And so you have to meet with key personnel before the meeting and get them on board. Allow time for acceptance. I think that's a place where a lot of times leaders miss it. They think that the minute they share the vision, everybody should just jump on board. But you need to allow time for acceptance. And then expect problems. Problems are going to come. Always point to your successes. You need to celebrate successes. Even if they're small ones, in front of everybody, you celebrate successes so they can have something to rejoice over. Any other questions or thoughts? Okay, very good information. We really don't have time to do another one because if we did, we wouldn't have time to discuss it. We'll start with number 5, Leadership 5 next week. My prayer is that this material speaks to you, gives you information that's going to translate into your life and your ministry in a very positive way, and is going to help you become a better leader and the leader God has called you to be. So that's my prayer. And I've enjoyed tonight. Hope you have. Hope you've got something from it. And we're going to call it an evening. It's 9:30 and give me time to get ready for my 10 o'clock meeting. So enjoyed being with you. God bless you guys.